when Malcolm Carter pushed open the door of the Bluebird Diner off Route 9 at 7:40 on a gray Tuesday morning, a little bell over the frame rang, and a man behind the register glanced up just long enough to decide he did not matter. The place smelled like burnt coffee and bacon grease and the lemon cleaner they used on the cracked vinyl booths. Rain ticked against the front window. A radio played something old and low behind the pass. 4 championship rings sitting in a safe 4 states away. A net worth past $400 million. One of the most recognized faces in the history of his game, in a plain gray hoodie and sweatpants and sneakers with a worn left heel. And to the Bluebird Diner, he was just one more big man wanting cheap eggs in the rain. He had pulled off the highway to wait out the storm. That was all. He slid into the corner booth, the one with the duct tape on the seat, and he picked up a laminated menu, and that was when the owner started in on the waitress. She was maybe 36, in a faded blue uniform a size too big, her hair pulled back, moving fast between 5 tables on tired feet. She had dropped a plate. 1 plate, and the man at the register, gray and square and furious, came around the counter and got right up in her face in front of the whole room. "That's coming out of your pay," he said. "Again, you think plates grow on trees? You think I run this place to clean up after you?" He went on. He used her like a thing to be angry at. She stood there and took it with her chin down and a rag wrung tight in both hands, and she said, "Yes, Walt. Sorry, Walt," in a voice worn smooth from saying it. And Malcolm Carter sat in the corner booth and watched all of it and said absolutely nothing. But he did not pick the menu back up. He sat very still, and his eyes moved across that waitress slowly. The way a man reads something he is afraid he is reading wrong, and 3 things landed on him one after another, and he filed each one away without making a sound. The first was on the chalkboard behind the register. The day's special, written in careful, looping cursive. Della's peach cobbler. $3. 50. He read the name twice. Della. He had not said that name out loud in over 30 years, because there had been no one left to say it to. The second was a thin string around the waitress's neck, mostly hidden under her collar. When she bent to wipe his table a moment later, it swung loose, and on the end of it was a small worn brass thimble, the dent in one side. The kind a woman who sewed kept her whole life. He had seen a thimble exactly like it on a chain, exactly like it on a kitchen windowsill in a 2-room apartment a very long time ago, and his throat closed when he saw it. The third he did not see. He heard it. As she carried a stack of clean cups back toward the counter, she hummed under her breath without seeming to know she was doing it. 3 low notes, then 2 higher, then back down, a little tune. An old one. He knew that tune in the deepest, oldest part of himself, the part that had been a frightened child once, and he set his coffee cup down on the table because his hand was not steady enough to hold it. Now here is the part that nobody in that diner understood yet. The reason Malcolm Carter had gone still in that corner booth was not the storm. It was that he had spent 33 years believing the woman wiping his table was dead. What he had absolutely no idea about, what no one in that room knew, was one single fact. He had a sister. He had lost her when he was 9 years old. And for 30 of those years, he had carried a folded document in a fireproof box that told him she had died at the age of 6. And he had grieved a small grave he was never even given the chance to visit. He was wrong. The paper was wrong. And the proof had been 3 feet away from him, humming their mother's song, calling out orders, getting docked a plate's worth of pay she could not spare. So stay with us for the whole video. Because what this enormous man does in the next 20 minutes does not just stun every single person in the Bluebird Diner. It undoes 33 years of two people grieving each other from opposite ends of the same lie. Malcolm Carter was born in a 2-room apartment over a laundromat, and for the first 9 years of his life, he was not alone there. He had a mother named Della and a baby sister named Renee, and the three of them against everything was the whole shape of his early world. Della worked nights and sewed by day, alterations for the dry cleaner 2 doors down, and that is why the brass thimble was always on the windowsill, and that is why her fingers always smelled faintly of thread and chalk. There was a thing she did when the storms came. Because the apartment had thin walls and the thunder over that part of the city was enormous, and little Renee would scream herself purple at the first crack of it. Della would gather both children onto the one good bed and hold them, the baby against her chest and Malcolm under her arm, and she would not shush them, and she would not pretend the storm was not there. She would say one thing every single time, and then she would sing. "We don't run from the thunder, babies," she would say. "We sing louder than it." And then she would hum a little tune she made up, 3 low notes and 2 high, and Malcolm would hum it with her, and the baby would stop screaming and listen, and the storm would lose. Della died the winter Malcolm was 9 and Renee was 3. It was fast and it was unfair, the way it is for women who work 2 jobs and never see a doctor in time. There was no family to take 2 children. The system took them, and the system did what it does. It split them. Malcolm, 9, old enough to fight and lose, was sent one direction. Renee, 3, light enough to carry, was sent another. He screamed her name down a hallway, and a door closed, and that was the last he saw of his sister. He searched for her the second he was old enough to. He filed the forms. He paid for a search the year he signed his first contract. And the agency sent back a single page, a clerical answer to a clerical question. And that page said his sister Renee had died of illness in a placement 3 years after their separation, at age 6. He read it on a Tuesday in a hotel room, and he did not get out of bed for a day and a half. He never doubted it. Why would a man doubt a government's own paper? So he did the only thing left a man can do. He built a children's foundation, and he put her name on it. The Renee Carter Fund had reunited over 400 separated foster siblings in 11 years. He had spent a fortune finding other people's lost sisters because he believed he could never find his own. He kept the Thimble's twin he'd salvaged from the old apartment in a frame on his desk. He still hummed 3 low notes and 2 high without realizing it. In elevators, on planes, the way you carry the dead with you in the small, unconscious habits of your hands and your throat. The man yelling about the plate, the owner, his name was Walt Bergen, and he was 61, and he was not a cruel man so much as a frightened one who had run out of better ways to feel. Walt's father had opened the Bluebird in 1968, and Walt had grown up in its kitchen, and he had promised the old man on his deathbed that he would never let it close. He had been failing at that promise for 3 years. The highway people had built a bypass that took half his traffic. His wife had been sick for 2 of those years, and the bills for that came in envelopes he had stopped opening. He had laid off the last cook and the last busboy, and now it was just him and 2 waitresses doing the work of 6, and every night he lay awake doing the math broke people do. The same impossible numbers over and over, and every morning he came in and the fear came out of him sideways at the people who could not fight back. He had not always been a man who yelled at a woman over a dropped plate. He had become one a little at a time, the way you become anything you swore you never would. The waitress was the only thing holding the place together, and he knew it, and he could not say it, because saying it would mean facing how close to the edge they both were. Her name, on her name tag, was Renee. She was 36. She had aged out of foster care at 18 with a trash bag of clothes and no one waiting. She had bounced through 6 placements as a girl, and she did not remember a single thing before the age of 4, the way the very young do not, except for one fragment she had never been able to place, a memory she was mostly sure she had invented. A big warm room, a storm outside, a woman's voice and a boy's voice humming the same little tune, 3 low notes and 2 high, and a feeling of being completely safe that she had spent 30 years trying to find her way back to. She had told that memory to her daughter as a bedtime story, the way you pass down the one good thing you have, and when her daughter was born she had named her Della, because in the memory, somewhere underneath, she was almost certain that it had been the woman's name, though she could not have said how she knew. She had ended up at the Bluebird 8 years ago answering a help-wanted sign in the window, and she had stayed because it was steady, and along the way she had started baking. She did not know where the cobbler recipe came from. She did not own a recipe card for it. Her hands just knew it, the amount of cinnamon, the way to cut the butter in cold, and the first time she made it for the diner a customer cried, and did not know why. And Walt put it on the board, and she had written Della's peach cobbler in her own careful cursive, without ever once stopping to wonder why she had named it that. It was simply the name that belonged on it. Her daughter Della, 9 years old, sat in the last booth most mornings before the school bus, doing homework, and there was a drawing of hers taped behind the register, a crayon house under a smiling sun, signed in big letters, Della, age 9. There were 2 other people in the Bluebird that morning who mattered. One was the second waitress, Kayla, who was 19 and saving for community college, and who had quietly slipped $4 from her own tips into the register the second Walt's back was turned, to cover the plate so it would not come out of Renee's pay. Kayla did things like that. She thought no one saw. The other was an old woman at the counter named Ada, 74, who had eaten breakfast at the Bluebird nearly every day since her husband passed in 2009, and who watched everything in that diner the way a person watches a show they have loved for years and know every line of. Ada watched the giant in the corner booth go still over his coffee. She watched him watch Renee. And after a while, in a voice like a screen door, she said one thing to no one in particular, the way old women say the true thing out loud. "That girl," Ada said, stirring her coffee, "has got a kind face for somebody nobody's ever been kind to. Always thought somebody'd come looking for her one day. People don't just come from nowhere." Malcolm could not finish his eggs. He tried twice. His hands would not cooperate. He told himself 100 things. He told himself Della was a common enough name. He told himself thimbles were thimbles and tunes were tunes, and a grieving man sees his dead in strangers all the time. That is what grief does. And he had a paper. He had a government's paper. His sister had been gone 33 years. But she came to refill his coffee, and she leaned in to set down the pot, and up close he could see her face, the way you can only see a face, up close, and it was their mother's face. It was Della's face exactly, the same wide-set eyes, the same small scar of a dimple in the left cheek that he had on the right, the matched set their mother used to call her 2 parentheses. "Anything else?" "Hun," she said. He made himself speak. His voice came out wrong. He asked her where she was from. She gave a tired half laugh. Everywhere, nowhere, foster kid. She started to move off. He asked her before he could stop himself what her mother's name was. She turned back and something flickered across her face, a wariness, because strange men do not usually ask that. "I never knew her," she said. I was a baby. A pause. I think it was Della. I'm not even sure. Why? And the whole diner did not know it yet, but the floor had just tilted. He could have said it then. He did not. 33 years of a closed grave do not open in one breath, and he was so afraid of being wrong, so afraid of wanting it this much and being wrong, that he did the only thing his body knew how to do when it could not hold any more. He set down the coffee. He stood up out of the corner booth, all 7 feet of him, and the whole room turned to look, because a man that size standing up changes the weather of a room. And then, quiet at first, and then not quiet, Malcolm Carter began to hum. 3 low notes. 2 high. Back down. Renee stopped in the middle of the floor. The coffee pot tilted in her hand. The hum was the tune from inside the memory she had spent 30 years sure she invented, coming out of a living stranger's mouth, note for note, the storm song. And her face came apart in stages, disbelief and terror, and a wild, impossible hope, all crowding in at once. Kayla froze with a plate in each hand. Walt came out of the kitchen. Ada set her spoon down. The radio played on to a room where nobody was breathing. "Where did you hear that?" Renee whispered. "Where did you hear that song? Nobody knows that song. It's not even a real song. I made it up." "You didn't make it up," Malcolm said. His own voice was breaking now. "Our mother made it up. Her name was Della. She sang it in the thunderstorm so you wouldn't be scared, and she'd hold you against her chest and she'd hold me under her arm. And she'd say, 'We don't run from the thunder, we sing louder than it.'" He took the framed thing out of his jacket, the salvaged thimble's twin, and held it up so she could see it match the one around her own neck. Her thimble. You kept her thimble. You were 3 years old, Renee. You shouldn't remember any of it. But your hands remembered. The cobbler is hers. You named your daughter for her, and you didn't even know why. Renee's knees went. Kayla caught the coffee pot. Malcolm caught his sister. "I'm Malcolm," he said into her hair. "I'm your brother. I held your hand in that hallway. I screamed your name when they took you." And then came the part that turned 33 years inside out. Because Renee pulled back and looked up at him with a grief older than the day, and she said the thing she had believed her whole life. "You left," she said. "They told me my brother was old enough to remember me, and he never came. I thought you didn't want me. I thought I wasn't worth coming back for." "No," he said. "No, baby, they sent me a paper that said you died. At 6. I've grieved you for 30 years. I built a whole foundation in your name to find other people's lost sisters because I thought I'd never find mine. I didn't lose you, Renee. I buried you. They made me bury you, and you were here the whole time, singing Mama's song to your little girl. 2 children, separated in a hallway, had each spent a lifetime believing a different lie about the other. He thought she was dead. She thought he chose not to come. And neither was true, and the only thing that was ever true was that they had never once stopped grieving each other. What he did next is the part that stunned the Bluebird Diner. He did not buy the place out from under Walt to humiliate him. He saw the unopened envelopes on the register shelf, the failing man, the deathbed promise written all over Walt Bergin's frightened face, and he made one quiet call. And within the hour, Walt's debts and his wife's medical bills were gone, and the deed to the Bluebird was being signed over, free and clear, into the name of the woman who had bussed its tables for 8 years and been docked for a dropped plate that very morning. Walt would stay on and run the kitchen his father built, with a wage that let him sleep, because a promise to a dying parent deserved to be kept. And grace, Malcolm had learned somewhere, costs the giver nothing he cannot spare. He pressed an envelope into Kayla's hands. The 19-year-old who had slid $4 from her own tips to save a stranger from a docking, and inside it was community college, and then some. Because the world needs people who do the right thing when they think no one is watching. And somebody had finally been watching. He sat down at the counter beside old Ada, who had said somebody would come for that girl one day, and held her hand a while, because she had been right, and being right about a kind thing should not go unmarked. And then he walked to the last booth, where a 9-year-old named Della sat with her crayons, and her wide-set eyes, and her small dimple, looking up at the giant who had made her mother cry the good way, and he crouched down to her level, which for him was a long way down, and he said, "Hi, Della. I'm your uncle. I knew the lady you're named after. She'd have loved you so much it'd scare you. A brother who buried a sister who was never dead. A sister who mourned a brother she thought had chosen to leave. A frightened man who got his father's diner and his sleep back. A young waitress whose quiet kindness was finally seen. A little girl who carried her grandmother's name without knowing she'd been carrying it home the whole time." He didn't run from the thunder of 30 lost years. He stood up in a diner full of strangers, and he sang louder than it. Just like their mother taught them both, in a room neither of them was supposed to remember. We don't run from the thunder. We sing louder than it. So do me a favor before you go. Drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from, and tell us about the person you'd cross the whole world to find if you ever got the chance. If Renee's song in 33 Years Undone put something in your chest, hit that like button, not for us, but for every separated kid who never stopped hoping somebody was still out there looking. Subscribe and join this family, because we tell the stories of the people the world tried to file away and forget. And there are more of them coming. There's another one waiting on your screen right now, and it might just be the one you needed today. Go on. We'll see you there.